Good morning, and I welcome all of you for this orientation program for the second intake of M.Arch landscape batch. I would like to welcome architect Aniket Bhagwat, and I will introduce him. Architect Aniket Bhagwat leads, designs and manages the implementation of design, planning and design, master planning and architecture at Prabhakar B. Bhagwat firm. He has been deeply involved in academics and has since 1985 been a visiting design faculty at the School of Architecture, CEPT Ahmedabad. He has for over a decade led the design faculty at the post-graduation Department of Landscape Design at the School of Architecture, CEPT Ahmedabad. He has taught and led studios in architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design. He is also a speaker who is invited at many forums of architecture, interior design, and landscape design. And he is a writer who has penned several essays about design, theory, practice, and pedagogy. Apart from this, through the various outreach initiatives he has curated and coordinated, he has consistently aimed to guide the discourse as it pertains to the field of design and other allied areas, including but not limited to city management, urbanity, and arts in the context of a society. So I welcome you, sir, and I would like to thank you for guiding us for framing the curriculum of this master's program at Manipal University, Jaipur. Over to Architect Aniket Bhagwat.
Thank you very much, Madhura. Thank you very, very much. So how many students do we have right now?
Sir, for first batch, we have...
Are they fine?
Yeah, for first batch, we have our intake is 10. For first batch, we have 4 students, and for the second batch, we have 5 students. And I would like to tell you that for the first batch, these 4 students received RSS Biodiversity Fellowship from Department of Science and Technology, Rajasthan.
Wow, very good. Very, very good. Very good. Okay, great. Students, I hope you guys can listen to me and it's clear. So, well, for those who have already spent a year, you're already sort of beginning to understand the world of landscape design. And for those who are joining it today, welcome and thank you for joining landscape, because I think it's a very, very special discipline, and it's a discipline that, you know, the more you spend time understanding it, the more you will learn and enjoy. You have to remember that when you're trying to be a landscape architect, there's a lot of unlearning that you need to do, and I think that you need to unlearn some things that you've learned as an architect. But at the same time, you also need to remember your understanding of space, because you know, the landscape is finally about space. So what I'm going to really try and do is I'm going to run through a presentation. It's a little longish, but nonetheless, I'm going to run through it to tell you what are the kind of challenges or what are the kind of work that landscape architects are being called upon today in this country to do. And at the end of it, of course, you know, I'd love it if you have some questions, if you want to sort of ask me things, whatever. So let me just quickly share this and let's go. Right. So what I'm really going to do is that I'm going to run through a series of things that the studio has had to do over the last, you know, some time, and just to give a sense of what do landscape architects really get called to do. So very often they can be called upon to really design very, very low cost and very simple children's play areas. This is in a small village near Ahmedabad, and where we started using, you know, sort of construction waste, rejected barrels and pulleys and bamboo and, you know, eucalyptus bullies to really create a children's play space. So, you know, you can often be called to do things like that. You can also be called to design public parks. So this one is a public park in Bombay, in Lower Parel, and it's a public park that tells the story of Bombay's ecological and cultural sort of history. So this is a part of Bombay which really had the textile mills, and now of course all the textile mills are gone, and you know, there's the new Bombay sort of being erected literally on the graveyard of the textile mills, and Bombay will soon forget, cities forget their past. And so this public park really tries to tell the story of its connection with the textile mills. And you can see these chimneys, this sort of pseudo chimneys at the background. On one part of the project really has this plaza, which if you look at it from the top, it ends up looking a little bit as if there are container yards, they're stacked on top, and you see these colorful sort of container yards to kind of remind you of Bombay's maritime connection, to remind you of Bombay's relationship with the sea and the port. What you see up in the front are really, except the two things on the side, what you really see are 7 quadrants, and each one planted with a certain plant of a certain ecology. To tell you about the fact that Bombay was really created out of 7 islands. And it was 7 islands that were put together, and that's how Bombay sort of got created. What you see at the back, behind the coconut trees, is a curve, pretty much like the curve of the Marine Drive, but the coconut plantation is the way that the Marine Drive used to present itself before urbanity took over. So, while you're designing public parks, I think that, or any project for that matter, landscape allows you to sort of make cultural or ecological narratives and to be able to tell them in the way that you sort of begin to look at design. So one more image there, and the planting on top. Sometimes you can be called upon to do something very, very small. So here in this case was a situation where a client had a large piece of land, and the only thing in that large piece of land were 2 mango trees, and he wanted to build a hut. And so we really designed this little hut under these 2 mango trees in a manner in which, we sunk it down so that we didn't have to disturb the branches of the trees, and the hut got built. So there is sensitivity that you need to bring in about the environment, about what you're really working with, and at the same time always work with poetry. On the other end of the spectrum, landscape architects can be called upon to do very, very large projects. So this one, for example, is a brand new city that's being built in Mumbai, near the sort of Dombivli area. And this is a city that is over 6,000 acres. So it's a city that will have the population of, well, one of India's metro cities, more than 2 million people when it gets finally completed. And as landscape architects, you can be called upon really to do the master planning, to design the road networks, and as you can see this in the picture. So really quality road networks, and its road signage, its street furniture, the pedestrian crossings, the high street retail, and you can see a bus stands. So all the street furniture, and you can get called upon not only just to anchor the master plan, but really design and deliver details on the ground. Or in the same city is a public park next to a lake, and it's a wetland park. So, so am I clear, or there is any problem? I'm clear. Okay. No, I just got a message saying that it's a bad network. So a public park of this kind, and you will design, you'll be called upon to do something of this kind, and some images of this public park. Or you'll be called upon in the same project is another park. This one is between sports areas. And so, while it's a simple park for people to traverse through, the benches are something that the office designed, and the office used the icon of the fastest animal because it was a sports arena, and designed these benches almost to sort of tell you that this place is about speed and health and so on and so forth. Or it could be the courtyards of the housing blocks. And so basically you can be called upon literally to design any and every part of the city. So in this particular area, city, we've done the roads, we've done housing courtyards, we've done the office districts, we've done the public parks, we've done the sports arenas, now we are doing the riverfront development. It's literally anything and everything that goes in the city. You can be called upon to do landscapes for homes. So here is a house that the office is built, and we call it the bridge house because it's on top of a hill, and it's a steel bridge. And as you can see, it's a steel bridge that sort of enters the house and runs through the house and comes out and penetrates and goes down again to the landscape. So it's about what kind of landscape will you do in these sort of projects, and you really in these sort of projects you're working with the idea of nature. Some of it which is sort of very wild and very beautiful nature, but some of it which is very controlled sort of nature. So on one side you have this wild nature, on the other side you have this very controlled idea of landscape with a pool and an amphitheater where there are several performances, and the bridge sort of goes through the house and descends on the other side back into landscape. You will be called upon to do podium design. So this is a 10-acre sort of project in Bombay, which is built on several levels of parking. So under both these gardens are about 3 levels of parking. And really, how do you design these landscapes in a manner in which they can mimic ground, but at the same time they're sort of, sculptural and they're graphic, and they're something that you can use very well. So this is a project in Bombay in Kanjurmarg, and it shows the kind of graphic quality of what you can achieve if you're working with landscape in a certain manner. I mean, please look at. I mean, I know this is going to go a little in a hurried manner, but please look at small details about how pathways intersect and how they terminate. And it's these little things that one has to learn to really be able to do it right, to be able to present a good quality sort of thing. On the other hand, you can also be called. This is a project that my father did, which is really 200 acres of a basalt quarry. And the quarrying operation here was over. And then he worked on this project for a period of about 8 years. There was a stream next door, and he could tap that stream and sort of, bring it there. And then he worked on this project and converted what was a basalt quarry like this into a forest like this. And even today, students go there. It's a place that you can go, but it's really about healing the environment. It's really about healing the ecology. It's about healing the land. And landscape architects can be called upon to do things like that. Or, very, very small spaces. So this is a series of pictures of very small spaces in Bombay, which are essentially offices. And, in Bombay, there's not too much space, but every little square foot that you get is an opportunity. So this is really the terrace of one of the office buildings in Bombay. This is a detail on the right-hand side of just a ledge along the driveway. And it's a 30-centimeter ledge, and it's lined with this metal cut trees with creepers growing on it. So no project is too big or no project is too small. Everything is an opportunity to really talk about design in a certain manner. This one is another office building where in that office building, there are these boulders that have been created and lost trees have been planted. So it's really a tribute to the Deccan Ghats and the loss of biodiversity in the Deccan Ghats. So these, each boulder carries one rare tree that is soon sort of being lost in the Deccan Ghats. Or it can be something as simple as that. So this one is the space on which the trolley moves to clean the glass facades of the building. So it has to be left clear. I mean, you can't do anything in that space. But even places like that give you an opportunity to do something. In this case, we've etched the skyline of Mumbai on this entire space. So whatever little space that you get, there's a chance to tell a landscape story. You can be called upon to do industrial landscapes. This is a large pharmaceutical plant that we've designed the architecture and the interiors and the landscape and the site planning for. But even if it's an industrial project, there is absolutely no reason why it cannot be poetic, why it cannot be ecologically right, why it cannot be sustainable. So, what you're really seeing is the way stormwater is managed in this project through swales. So really bioengineering is being used in this pharmaceutical plant. But at the same time, there is a cultural sense to the manner in which the landscape vignettes of this 100-acre pharmaceutical plant really are. So this is the entrance sequence, for example. And as you can see, there is always a sort of desire to sort of find a connection between ecological principles or natural principles, but at the same time also to do it as a manner in which it's poetic or in manner in which it's graphically beautiful. So I think beauty is something that we don't think about enough anymore. I think that we assume that beauty, well, it either happens naturally or it's not important, but it's actually important. We live in a world where, we don't have too much beauty of any kind. And by beauty, I don't mean in a very superficial manner. I mean beauty in a manner in which you feel good, your soul feels good, you feel good about yourself, you feel good about the world. And I think landscape architecture allows you that sort of opportunity all the time. So images from the same, this is the center prayer sort of location of the project. And there were two banyan trees, and around that we've created a central space where employees come in the morning and stand for a couple of minutes before they go to work. So they sort of pray there. But even that central space, as you can begin to see, has got a very strong sort of presence in terms of design. This is another very large pharmaceutical plant that we've done. Again, this is about 70, 80 acres. And we've done the architecture, the site planning, and also the landscape. And what you're really seeing are hills and mountains and valleys. And all this is really done because this site was way below the existing road levels, and there was no way of discharging the rainwater. And really, these hills and the permeability or the capacity of the soil to absorb water is very, very low. I mean, the rate of recharge is not that high. And so it gives you an opportunity, hence, to create these valleys where water accumulates for a little while and then slowly percolates through a series of very, very well calculated recharge wells and sort of recharges the ground. So again, there is ecological principles, there are environmental principles, but they're always sort of merged and fused with the idea of art and poetry. And I think that fusion is something that I think is particularly important. So details of the office building that we built there, and this is an office building on the lower terrace of the entire project. And we have faith in our bioengineering, so we've really built the office in the lowest area, because if anything's going to get flooded, this is going to get flooded. This is already a 7-year-old project, and there's been no problem. But to sort of believe in bioengineering, believe in the kind of principles of ecology, and then to find ways of telling that story all the time. You can be called upon to do things like this. So this is a weekend home, for example, that we've designed. And in the weekend home, there are the beautiful gardens that are connected to the weekend homes. And while one part of the landscape is this sort of pristine sort of greens, the other is this wild quadrants of sort of planting that you can meander and walk about. So you'll be very often called upon to design gardens for homes. And even there is a great opportunity there. This, for example, is the landscape for a very large corporate house and their office premises. And even a place like this, it's an urban landscape, but it gives you a chance of telling many stories. So you can see in the front islands in the water, and these islands are only for birds. So migratory birds come and reside on those islands. On the right-hand side, this is an early picture, now it's much grown. But on the right-hand side is a museum of lost trees, and you sort of walk through that museum, through this trellis, and each one of them leads you on the left and the right to quadrants, and each quadrant has got one lost tree. In this case, the Butea monosperma, but there are Salvadora persica or the Ticomella undulata. So trees that we don't plant anymore. And the idea is to really create the memory of the lost trees in this, and these islands which are just for birds. Or there are other places in the project where we grow food. So it's a corporate office, but nonetheless, there are quadrants like this where we actually grow herbs which are used in the canteen, and sort of they get used. Or there's a thin basement, and on the basement we've planted a grassland, because below that is parking, but it's really a whole grassland that has been done. So you really are talking about ecological vignettes. You're talking about grasslands, you're talking about water landscapes, you're talking about lost trees, you're talking about biodiversity, and so on and so forth. This is one more home. And the landscapes of this home really are about dichotomy. They're dichotomous landscapes, which really means that they present to you completely contrary sort of emotions constantly. So, this is an image of one of the courts in the house, which is very, very moist and very sensuous. But just adjacent to this court, separated by a wall, is a very dry court. So it's a landscape of fractals. It's a landscape of discontinuities. It's a landscape of contradictions, and there's always a place to be able to experiment with these abstract ideas of life, abstract ideas of meanings of life through the landscape that one does. So, that's the court, and just next to it, separated literally by a wall, is a court like this. And in other parts, there are hidden spaces in the project where you can go and hide and sit. There are existing Salvadora trees which are memorable by, so they're made memorable by the way that a court has been created around them. And then, of course, the rest of it is good, usable sort of landscape with ponds that are hidden away. And that's the house. So again, it's a house that we built and the landscape that we've done for this thing. You can be called upon to really work with students. In this case, in a small place in Delhi, we were a small school. We were called upon to work with students, and we worked with students and created a landscape literally in the margin of the school. So there's a 4, 5, 6 meter margin on the side of the building, and it's in that margin that we've created this very interactive landscape that children can engage with, children can go and work in. You'll be called upon to do large venues. So this is, for example, a very, very large wedding venue. It's the size of a football ground. It's massive. And this is a lighting system of that venue. And it's really created on this set of truss with sort of lights. And, in the night, of course, when the events are, the trusses disappear and the lights come up. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. No, I just thought. Okay. And, after 10, 12 years, what we decided to do is that we decided to change this lighting, and on the truss, we sort of hung clouds and stars. So now in the evening, when you begin to see it, it's a place with sort of lit up clouds and lit up stars. You can also be called upon to do very, very large environmental impact studies. So this is a very large parcel of land in the Western Ghats, and it was up for a hill station development. So it's really about studies of geology, soils, pollution, biodiversity, slopes, hydrology, and then from there, how do you begin to create a kind of a template that you can start looking at a certain kind of development. And this was a long process of 3 to 4 years, where we really had to study the site and its biodiversity in great detail and sort of come up to do a quality master plan for this space. So some images from the renders that we had done for this place. You can also be called upon, this one is in Udaipur, to sort of work with historical sites, and this is an old fort that was converted into a hotel, and it really allowed you to tell mental landscapes. So there was, of course, the Kamal Court, and sort of the lotus was reimagined as a modern sort of entity, and we sort of made this the Kamal Court, or we used a very Persian 4-square garden mechanism of gravity-fed water to create these gardens at the lower part of the palace where vegetables are grown, and so on and so forth. You will also be called upon to do very, very sort of distinctive, high-quality landscapes. This one is for World One in Bombay. It's one of the tallest residential buildings in the world. The entire landscape, including the road that you see in front. So below the road is actually several levels of basement, and it's about really designing the road networks and the landscapes and the courtyards of this entire project. So so some images from World One, which are very high quality sort of landscapes, where the sense of detail and the sense of precision required is very, very high. And as you can see in the way that simple things like the tree grating, or just the way the manuals are done for the project. And some images of other parts. This is the arrival court. Some images of the arrival court. This is the play space on one of the podiums, a very large children's play area that has been created. Pools that have been built on some of the podiums. And on the parking places, there are these tennis courts and play courts and a swimming pool, which are really built in parking garages. It's very high quality, very precision driven sort of work. This one was a project that actually in the center was a drain, an industrial drain that separated a new office that was being built on the left and the factory premises on the right. And the project really was about separating the new office premises from the factory premises. So really, if you ask me, the site was the width of the drain, and that was the extent of the site. And even something as small as that allows you to be able to create almost sculptural sort of points to begin to do it. So you, as landscape architects, I think you'll be called upon literally to work on anything and everything that is in the outside realm. You'll be called upon to do public parks, you'll be called upon to do industrial areas, you'll be called upon to do housing areas, you'll be called upon to do institutional landscapes, you'll be called upon to do private landscapes or home landscapes. You'll be called upon to look at large biodiversity or large natural areas or village sort of rural landscapes or wildlife areas. Literally, the world is open to you. And I think that the important thing is to be able to do it in a manner in which there is process, to do it in a manner in which there is a blending of great design skills. And that's one area that I think we all have to focus a lot on. Design cannot be taught, it has to be learned by yourself. And I think that we don't pay too much attention on the ideas of simple design. And I think it's absolutely critical for landscape architects to be able to do that. So to really focus on design, focus on the idea of environment and biodiversity, but equally invest your mind in the idea of philosophy and poetry and visual arts. And I think landscape allows the making and the culmination of all these ideas together. So what the other thing that the office does is it continuously through LEAF, which is the Landscape Environment and Advancement Foundation, it does a lot of research. And so being a landscape architect, and for that matter, being a professional, is not only about doing projects. Being a professional is about finding different ways all the time, about understanding and exploring and expanding your ideas of what the discipline is. So through LEAF, we do many research projects, we do many CSR projects. This is an image of two new books that a fellowship that we had awarded have led to. On the left is a book that talks about wild planting. How do you look at wild plants, forgotten plants, and bring them into our idea of gardens? On the right is the cover of a book that talks about how do you install the idea of wilderness into projects. So there are continuing new ways about thinking about landscape, new ways about imagining about landscape, and it's a dynamic discipline, and I think that we have to invest ourselves in it. So these are some images out of that book and about the wilderness book and the matrix planting book. We are also developing at this point of time a plant app. So an app that will allow designers to develop their plant material list in whichever part of the world that they are in. Right now, I guess the major cities. But really, how do you begin to look at planting design or plant material listing from a morphological perspective? And LEAF is right now in the process of sort of developing and patenting this app. It's kind of done, and we should be able to launch it soon enough. What I'm going to run through now, and I'm going to run through it very fast. I mean, it's, and I think you should just look at the images as I'm going, is to try and explain to you the rigor or the energy that is required to put together projects like this. And I think, you must begin to instill in yourself this discipline of how do you look at process, this discipline of how you begin imagination. So for a project that is right now being executed, we produced a book that we call the Design Handbook. And this book really sort of maps the entire process that led to the final designs. And I'm going to run through it very quickly, so I'm not going to explain it. So please just look at the images and the words. So, we talked about process, and I think, we can take a minute to read this. And, all designs have processes. So, when people say, yes, I've got a process, of course, all designs have got processes. But at the very minimum level, a process will sort of respond to usable spaces or the program or the cost or the constructability, or it can add the user sort of imagination. But that really is the minimum expectation of a process. A process has to examine ideas of life and culture, and it has to find ways of developing conversation that engage individuals and engage with history and our changing notions of life. So, when you say you have a process or you're developing a process, you have to ask yourself, what does that process lead to? Does it lead to, well, just an answer to the program? Somebody says, please design a landscape of 5 sports fields and parking areas and spectator stands, and you end up doing that. Well, that's the minimum responsibility that process has. It has to go far beyond that and become something that's far more poetic and far more sort of engaging in terms of conversation. So, we can read this at some point of time about what really process is, but in that book I wrote, I said design is like a well-honed, gifted classical dancer whose every gesture is coordinated, has meanings and fills our mind with awe and hope and introduces us to the many wonders of life. Or it is a pretender who gesticulates limbs wildly and hoping to pass off as a dancer, and that certainly is not design. So you have to be very, very clear about what is your process and what should it lead to in terms of design. So this process really started for the project with images like this, which are really about how we drove to the site and how much time it took. And that was, of course, the site. It had the black buck. But then, just making drawings of the character of the site. So on the top, you can just see how the soil of the site was, or how the water moved, or how the grasses on the site were, or the sounds of the site, in this case of the animals, or the birds, or other sounds of crackling leaves. So you begin to sort of map all this so that you begin to sort of understand and imbibe. And it's a bit like Riyaz. You begin to sort of imagine the site in a far nicer way. And then you start drawing literally paintings to start imagining what this site could be. I mean, could it be a place like this of tranquility? Could it be a place where you could be walking in wild sort of crops, or a place that you could sit and look at the night sky? And then you start taking that site and draw it with many, many different ways. So, these are about 10 or 15 different ways and quickly drawn about how distribution of functions and things can happen on the site. And you start also imagining what kind of architecture the site can have. And then you start sort of making a drawing. So, and you put it together, you get a drawing. And of course, this drawing we presented to the client, but he didn't want to build one central home. We wanted to build distributed homes. So from here, we started again looking at reorganizing the site and sort of begin to draw the water body, the various villas, the public pavilion, the road network, and so on and so forth, and started really developing many ideas of how different components of the build would begin to happen and what was the relationship with the water, the relationship with landscape. There were several models till it started evolving at some level. So this was one villa. This is the second villa, very different from the first. Again, one was examining its sense of relationship with the landscape, the nature of its architecture. There was a third villa and sketches for that, a fourth villa and sketches for that. And then there was a public pavilion, and we started imagining and made many, many models to imagine what the public pavilion was. Then we started making models, sort of grading models of how the site would develop. At some point, then we decided we only wanted to build 2 villas in the public pavilion. So we went back to the master plan, started developing the landscape grain even better, and started really detailing the villas a lot more. And we can start seeing how each villa is developed slowly, bit by bit, with every detail, till you start really arriving at the general architecture of the villa. And this is the second villa. We start looking at the idea of color, texture, thickness and thinness of wall, the plastic nature of this villa, and you start making models, and it finally sort of reaches the design of the villa. And again, the public pavilion, which earlier was meant to be built in brick shells, but we abandoned that because there is no structure code that allows you to do it. And then we started changing it almost like a tented camp that sat at the edge of water and imagined its roofs in a certain manner. and the public pavilion. And while the architecture was being done, we were simultaneously looking at other portions of the project, like the amphitheater, and we were making models for it, or just the staff areas or the staff hamlets, and how each staff area was imagined like a small village, and what is the architecture of the staff area, or a huge amount of detail, or just the way the temple would sit at the edge of the water. And the temple in this case was just a boulder, a rock on which they, sort of pour oil every day. So it's a very simple primal ritual. And how do you sort of create a space for that ritual? So the temple became a hedge along which you walked in, and at the end was this stone. And really huge studies of how the light would come in, what would be the diameter of the cutout in the roof, and hence what kind of light would cast itself. And gradually sort of the design and the models of the temple started happening, or the entrance areas, or simple things like the bridge over the pond, and models and sketches for it. So every component of the project, really, you draw, you model, you think. There's a very, very intense process. That nothing is quick. This project took the office close to about a year and 2 months, a year, 3 months of almost 20 people working on it at different times to finally begin to design it. And then gradually sort of, the architecture started falling into place, the location started falling into place, and things like this. And simultaneously, you were beginning to draw the landscape, and what was the story of light and shade, or what was the story of color, or what was the story of the orchards, or what was the story of the different gardens. And the master plan of the landscape design started sort of appearing, and in that, then you started sort of figuring out, which was the area of dense grasslands, or sparse grasslands, or trees, and so on and so forth. And you start making models for the landscape also. And then finally, all that gets together to become a master plan. And that's how the site will look in a couple of years. A lot of the planting is already done, the lake is already excavated, and the architecture for all the structures have started. It's come out of plinth. So a couple of years from today, this project will end up looking a little bit like that. But at the end of it, when you look at it, you can sort of, one may like it or not like it, or one may think it's quite beautiful or very well thought out. But the point is that behind this thinking requires really, really intense spiritual, philosophical processes that allow you to investigate. And these are slow processes, they are not hurried processes, that allow you to investigate how design should be happening. So the public pavilions, and the inside of the public pavilions, and some details. So some of the other gardens, some of the villas, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to run through that very quickly. The point to tell you is that I think everybody, all of you, must invest honestly, without any pretensions, without any, you have to be honest to yourself. You have to be, if I may say, almost bare or naked. And you have to serve the idea of process with no ego, with no preconceived notions. And it's only then that, good things may happen. So I wrote this in the end, and I said the purpose of the process is no different than Ibn Battuta, that traveler, who said traveling, it leaves you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller. So, process is really, you could not say why. But because it is important, it is to find meanings, examine carefully the constructs that shape us, imagine different ways to allow readings of life, and leave stories embedded in work that will speak differently to different people long after the designers have gone. That, I think, is what landscape architecture can really allow you to do, and a lot more. But for that, you will really have to begin to sort of get introduced, but fall in love with this huge and beautiful discipline, which is centuries old, and begin to understand what it really means, and from there begin to sort of develop your stories. And you really, so you have to find love, and if you don't have it, find it, and if you can't find it, try harder. But if you don't find this love for the profession, then you're not serving the profession well. And I really think, some of you have already spent a year, some of you just joined, and I think you're in front, ahead of a great journey that you can become part of. And you should really enjoy this. Your teachers will try as hard as they can to expose you to that world, but you got a year or 2 years to do it, and that's a very short time. So in that time, over and above what they can do, you really have to explore the world of landscape through books, to going to places, to seeing projects, to talking amongst yourself, to talking to people, and you can become a different human being 1 year, 2 years down the line. So I think really welcome, and if you have any questions for me, please ask me if you've got any questions about this.
There are some questions. Ginny will take the questions.
Thank you so much for your inspiring presentation. And there are some couple of questions uh, from a student like Snehal has asked, how can we stick to the narrative when the development is outspeaking the planning, where the global cultural needs seem to complete the indigenous ways of living? Like we talk about the native and the world is demanding the exotics. So yeah.
So I think first of all, the question that you've asked is, I think, has been answered now in several projects across the country. So when you ask that question, to a certain extent, the assumption is that it's a difficult thing to do, but it's actually not. There are enough and more design firms in the country and across the world who work with trying to create a language that is relevant in that cultural context. And I think part of design is really that, to learn to speak a language that is relevant to yourself and the people and the culture around you. And learning the language is a difficult job. I mean, for that, you have to keep trying different ways of talking. None of us learned how to talk the day we were born. We spent months and years, and finally we all learn how to be able to communicate well. So it's something that we have to learn. And when you talk about exotics and local and native planting, I think the debate about this has become quite large in the world about what do you classify as exotics, what do you classify as naturalized, and what do you classify as something that is really local. So I think in general, you have to be careful about the kind of plant material that you use in the project. Not just from the ecological perspective, but you also need to be careful about the plant material in terms of the graphic manner in which it represents the idea of that region. And plants have the ability of being able to represent the mood of the region by the coarseness of their texture or the fineness of their texture. So I think using plant material is not just an ecological thing. It is as much a poetic sort of requirement. And I think, I can someday walk you through a series of projects done in the country. You don't have to look way outside the country anymore, which really start talking about this at a great level, if that is the question.
Yeah, well answered, sir. And we now you have so much of work. We are keep referring your Leaf publications and all for our founder batch, and even we intend to write in your Leaf if given an opportunity.
Sure.
So another question from Ayushi is, how do you select materials for your projects?
So, I'll answer this slightly differently. So a lot of people think that you design, and after the design is over, you detail a project, right? But that's wrong. The process of design never ends. So even when you detail a project, you're actually finding the punctuations, the exclamations, the hyphenations of the conversation. So your details really allow you to express the philosophy of what your design idea is. So when you select material, you have to be very careful about is it consistent with the design thinking or the design philosophy that you have installed for the project. There are many projects across the globe in India who have a reasonably decent design philosophy, and then they crumble when it comes to selecting materials. They crumble when it comes to making details because, that is done carelessly. But it's not. I mean, to give a simple example, if you're talking about a bench in a garden and you would think it's a very easy thing, there are thousands of ways of doing a bench. And if you remember that public park that we showed you, for example, I showed you from Bombay, there the benches in the public park are done, some of them are done like boats to sort of tell you about the islands of Bombay and its connection with water. And some of them are done like these benches that you find on ferries where the back sort of moves up and down, which are like this steamer benches. So every part of the project actually allows you to further the conversation, and so does material. So you select material like that, you lay it in a certain manner. Of course, you worry about durability, you worry about maintainability, you worry about all these sort of things, but that's the obvious thing to worry about. Beyond that, you start worrying about what is the material, what is the story that the material is telling, and that is part of the design process. Yeah.
Snehal, you want to ask?
Yeah, sir. Good afternoon, sir. This is Snehal Mathur.
Yes.
I'm a second year master's student. It was an extremely delightful and insightful presentation, sir. May I ask you another question that I had in my mind? So, as landscape architects, we are taught to not be anthropocentric and also be really sensitive towards the natural processes in our designs. So as a part of my DST project that I was doing, I was studying the role of wetlands to promote and conserve biodiversity. So I was studying the bird behavior there and also documenting the threatened species that visit, because it is a Ramsar site, and among other threatened species like the painted stork, the lesser florican, the flamingos are also a threatened species. So I was wanting to design something in lines where the habitat for the flamingos can be repeated in a way so that in other numbers, this place also becomes a place where they can breed other than just staying there. So now, while I'm studying and researching over this, I'm sort of stuck somewhere where now I feel that how do I go back to thinking about humans? How do I bring back, like, what can my design bring back in, like, am I going too bird specific in my design, and am I overshooting the human bits? And if I think about humans and if I build something there, it becomes like the birds wouldn't want some intruders in their habitat. So now I'm sort of stuck in between.
So do you watch Netflix?
Yes, sir, I do.
So everybody who's in this class must watch a movie that's called A Little Chaos. Have you seen it?
No, sir, I haven't.
So please put it down as your assignment for the week.
Sure,
and we see this movie called A Little Chaos. And it will tell you that this conversation about landscape architects not being human-centered or man-centered is actually nonsense. First of all, it's complete nonsense, right? I think you have to be different things in different projects.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you need to be completely human-centric, and sometimes you don't want the human-centricness to express itself greatly. But at the end of the day, yes, landscape is about conserving nature. Yes, it's about protecting the earth. But then, that is also the job of an environmentalist. That's also the job of a wildlife person. So what makes a landscape architect different from the other professionals? And the landscape architect is different from other professionals because he or she has the responsibility and the ability to tell stories of our world, of our nature, of our different ideas of nature in situations that are presented irrespective of whether they're big or small.
True.
That's what defines you as a landscape architect. You're not a wildlife conservationist. You're not a naturalist. So there are people who do that, right? So today, as a landscape architect, you step in. Sure, I mean, it's good that you understand the world of a conservationist, or you understand the world of a naturalist or a wildlife person. Great, I mean, that's fantastic. But finally, what are you doing that's different? And what you're doing is that you're beginning to find a poetic manner in which you're making a communication with, whether it's the avifauna, or whether it's the fauna, or whether it's nature itself and man. And you're allowing contemplative conversations, right? So,
Yeah.
first of all, never believe when somebody tells you that landscape architecture is not about people. It is fully about people, first and foremost. And it's about people and the relationship with the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way you have to approach it, right? How do you tiptoe in that space in a manner in which you don't disturb the habitat or the inhabitants of the space, but nonetheless, you can engage with that space in a certain manner. I mean, I'm sure that you'll figure out a way of designing it, but it's about people.
Yeah, sir.
If that's much of an answer, and please see the film.
Yeah, sir. Thank you. I will.
Yeah. So are you enjoying your course?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So how many months left for you to pass out now? The voice disappeared, yeah.
Sir, we have designed this course as one semester internship with landscape professional or allied fields.
Okay.
So this first batch students are for training now. They are doing their professional training. They are in third semester. So next semester will be thesis. And now they are working for pre-thesis also while they are doing a training.
And the thesis is a design thesis or it's a research thesis?
Both are allowed, sir.
Both are. That's very good.
Yeah.
That's very good. That's very good.
So
And the
in
training is for how long? The training is for?
one semester, sir, 3 months.
Oh.
Yeah.
It should be longer, ideally, but yes.
One semester we have given, and I think 2021 June they will be graduating.
Wow.
Batch.
And new landscape architects in this world. Lovely.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. Any other questions?
Vinit?
So how my question is, sir, how do you manage your time? Because I've seen your energy and writing so many things and telling stories, even in Instagram, your blogs and what not. How do you manage your such a tremendous energy?
Well, I don't have anything else to do, first of all. This is all I have to do. So honestly, I think that the moment you get absorbed in this idea and you stop thinking about it, as a job, or you stop thinking about it as an additional responsibility, but you start thinking about it as life, right? I mean, so the world of design is not separate from me anymore. I live, breathe, enjoy that world constantly. So I never sort of feel that I'm running out of time, or I don't want to do this, and also I think what happens over a period of time, and that really I think students have to. So I have to confess something to you, Vineet. So let me tell you this story, and the students should also know this story, right? So I was a very poor student when I was doing architecture. So I spent 5 years doing architecture in CEPT, and I was really like a bad student. I mean, that's the only way to explain it, right? And then I went and joined Delhi SPA, and I don't know why I joined landscape. I mean, it was, to me, it felt like because my father was a landscape architect, then naturally I should be a landscape architect. So all these stories that you like to tell, or people like to tell, that I always wanted to be a landscape architect, nonsense. I didn't want to be anything. I basically wanted to be a bum. I mean, that's what I wanted to be, right? And I spent 5 years being a bum. And then, life pushed me. So I went to Delhi to do my landscape. And in Delhi, a person now who will become a very, very dear friend, a girl, she had graduated from the Delhi Architecture College, and I had graduated from CEPT. And in one of the first weeks, she's now a very, very dear friend. But in the first week, she said something very nasty to me. So I was saying something and she said, you're from set. You people can only talk. No, you can't do anything in life. And that pissed me off. It really pissed me off. And I said, I'm going to show the damn girl, what I'm capable of. So for 2 years, I slogged like crazy and won everything. I mean, all the gold medals I won, I topped every subject, whatever. But once you got absorbed in that, it just was a great way of being. I mean, the world opened up to you in ways that I could have never imagined, right? Because you suddenly realize that all you required was your mind. You didn't require anything else. And it required your mind to make connections. I remember doing presentations in the landscape department, which my faculty never understood. So I used to do presentations of kinesthetic theories in landscapes of transition. God alone knows what that meant in those days, right? But actually, I was talking about stuff like this because I said, well, I want to talk about things like this. Now, whether you want to understand it, whether you don't want to understand, well, that's your problem. But my mind is the place that I can roam the world and imagine. And once you get into that mental frame, I don't think you get tired. You just, it's like one big roller coaster ride and it's a fun ride. And students really have to find that space. I mean, everybody has to find that space. But students particularly have to find that space. They can't tell themselves, okay, no, I'm not so good. I was a bum. And, for somebody like me to be doing what I'm doing today, I'm sure all you students are far more sharper and far more committed to your work. So without any doubt, you will do better than I will do for sure. But you have to believe that. You have to believe that, you want to do that. So, yeah, it's fun. So, Vineet, time for you to start dreaming.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And fortunately, I was also I graduated from SP Delhi under Professor Sahil, so I can sense what you are talking about and the plethora of work that you have done for our community. It's tremendous. Like Leaf, that's an incredible work because even our time 10 years back, we don't have that information about Indian landscape and what to see your projects and the way you are taking up 7 parks in Ahmedabad and doing it, and that's amazing. That's incredible.
The 7 parks are done, Vineet. So 7 are open already. So the actual mandate is to do 100 parks.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right. But so there's a client who's a friend, and so he's a large corporate. So we got into a conversation and he said, how many parks do you want to do? I said 100 parks. So he said, are you sure? I said, well, you're a big corporate. I'm a successful landscape architect. If the two of us get together and only do a couple of parks, then we're wasting our time. So we really need to do 100 parks. So we've finished 7, 8 now. We're doing 2 more, which are very big parks, which will get open, I think, by March. But the idea is to keep doing it. Every year to pick up 3, 4, 5 parks and keep doing it till we have the energy to do it. You should also, Vineet, there's a lecture that the students can enjoy. It's on, the Bangalore International Center?
Yes, sir.
So if you go to the Bangalore International Center, there is a talk that I've given and it's recorded. So it's a very good recording called A Million Gardens. And for landscape history and understanding ways of looking at, Indian landscapes, I think students will enjoy that talk. It just sort of presents ways of looking at things. So kids might enjoy it if they have the time. After seeing a little chaos, if they want to see this, they can do that too.
Yeah, we'll surely see that, sir.
Yeah.
Even you have shared something in your website. I think that video is being shared.
Yeah. It's there. Yeah. It's in the website. Correct.
I've seen that. I've not seen that video, but I've seen that link.
Yeah. So I think you should. Students should see it. I think they'll kind of enjoy it.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Vineet?
Yeah, unfortunately, sir, because of this live session, we are not able to interact with the student. But definitely, we'll sort it out, this technical thing, And you have given a complete starting from a small little hamlet to a regional scale to a city scale, a complete Pithora. Let them absorb a bit, because it's like 35 years of experience put
I
into
know.
a 15 minutes of lecture, and
I know.
let them absorb a bit, and then we'll come back to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
It's
Always a
pleasure
pleasure.
talking to you, sir. So
Thank
great
you.
insight.
Take
Thank you.
care, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think we can take advantage of this online mode, and we will request you in future also to guide our students, or for any kind of jury, if this is online now.
So do one thing, Madhura. Get everybody to look at this movie called The Little Chaos and write 250 words on it and send it to me. I'd love to see what people are saying.
Sure, sir. Sure. We will definitely do that. All eight students, or you want only written by senior batch?
You can also write if you want. Anybody can write.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I'd
Sure.
love to hear it. I'd love to see what people think of it.
Okay. Sure. Sure. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Okay.
Bye. Take care.
Yes, we'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Yeah.